The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by Xerox in 4 parts without commercial interruptions.
Hey guys, welcome back to Pretentious Cinephile 1982 podcast. We're in episode 5, here to talk solely about PTA, Paul Thomas Anderson, going through his selected works, but I'm going to pretty much talk about his entire filmography from Hard 8, aka Sydney, to his most recent film, One Battle After Another. I believe that's about 10 films in his filmography. If I'm not mistaken, I'm going to look that up later. But for now, gotta plug the website. You can find more episodes and more writings, musings of yours truly at pretentiousblogspot1982.blogspot.com. Check out all of our goodies, film cells, film posters over at pinterest.com/pretentiouscinephile1982. We haven't updated it very much lately, so I'm sorry about that, but go and check it out. There's a plethora of cool IMAX film cells, posters. Gonna update it soon, so I promise, guys. And going back, looking at Paul Thomas Anderson's filmography, he has 10 so far, so he beat Quentin Tarantino to the punch for his 10th film, even though he debuted into the scene as indie wunderkind, talking about Paul Thomas Anderson, about 4 years after Quentin Tarantino, 1992, with Reservoir Dogs. So I know it's kind of unfair to compare those two. Those two really have very different filmographies, but in the beginning they started out, very alike, very kind of a cinephile's filmmaker. Paul Thomas Anderson probably later distinguished himself further with outside influences, meaning, he didn't just stick to this one thing that like Quentin Tarantino just like made Grindhouse and then just stuck to making kind of Grindhouse spaghetti western films, variations of Grindhouse, but still kind of samey, you know what I mean? Like Wes Anderson also, to bring in someone else, is also kind of makes films that are kind of samey, if that makes sense. And Paul Thomas Anderson kind of veered off after There Will Be Blood, kind of made like cold, detached, British, like Kubrickian kind of films. Like There Will Be Blood is so Kubrickian, so 2001, 2000, so The Shining almost. I'd say The Shining probably because of its, I guess, synthy score, like that humming, kind of uneasy. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but yeah, he's a fascinating filmmaker, Paul Thomas Anderson. I knew about him since Magnolia. I had a funny story in my top 10 films of 1999 about Magnolia, how I watched tape 2 instead of tape 1 back when I rented VHS tapes. That's how I first saw it. So it's very interesting going back to watch Boogie Nights. I haven't seen that in quite some time. I used to watch it all the time as a aspiring filmmaker, aspiring screenwriter. It was very inspirational, as I'm sure it is to many young filmmakers today and filmmakers who are established. Highly influential, probably the film of a generation, as Leonardo DiCaprio said. Strangely enough, passing through PTA, wanted to cast Leo from seeing Basketball Diaries. Leo turned it down for Titanic and cast Mark Wahlberg instead, who was also from Basketball Diaries. Crazy to think what would have been, right? Leo still today completely regrets that decision. He says, that's the movie of my generation, talking about Boogie Nights. But imagine if he made Boogie Nights. Maybe he wouldn't have become a big star either, who knows? That's all hearsay. That's the fun part of the what ifs. But he eventually cast him in One Battle After Another, so all's well that ends well, right? So just to reiterate, guys, we're going to be talking about, so spoilers, obviously, going to be from Heart 8, Boogie Nights, Magnolia, Punch Drunk Love, There Will Be Blood, The Master, Inherent Vice, Phantom Thread, Licorice Pizza, and One Battle After Another. Probably not going to get too in deep with all of them because I want to keep this relatively short, probably under an hour. So we're not going to go into like plot heavy details. So let's just get started, shall we? Talking about Paul Thomas Anderson, he has a plethora of influences. I'm going to get into them as I talk about each movie, but from the start, you can tell maybe he's very Altman-esque, very Robert Altman. I mean, sorry, Boogie Nights and Magnolia obviously are very like these hyperlink, intertwined stories, like very Altman. Shortcuts, I'm thinking of maybe Nashville. He also makes these quiet, like kind of palate cleansers, as I like to call them, in his filmography. Because Punch Drunk Love, after he made that, he spun off into this whole other direction after that. Ditto, perhaps, Licorice Pizza. It kind of diverged from his path of what he was going through from Phantom Thread, and then now One Battle After Another. Maybe will spin off into this whole other direction of his career. It's very fascinating to think about. Literary influences, obviously, Thomas Pynchon with his Inherent Vice adaptation into Viceland, which was adapted. He adapted for One Battle After Another. Another quality of his films, he is from the San Fernando Valley, so most, if not all of his films take place in Southern California. Variations of it. Encino, Venice, I think, takes place, Inherent Vice takes place in, with the sole exception of, can you guess? I keep thinking Inherent Vice, but no, I'm thinking of Phantom Thread, which is a London film, completely out of the country. And another interesting note here is that after Punch Drunk Love, most of his films were period pieces, which you can also kind of dissect as maybe as an observation of what's going on right now. There Will Be Blood, talking about oil and Iraq War and, oil conflicts and overseas Middle East conflicts, what have you. Bush, I think that was the Bush era, right? And his latest film, One Battle After Another, is the first film since Punch Drunk Love that takes place in modern times. Interesting to note there. And Phantom Thread, I'm reading here from a Reddit, that movies that influenced individual PTA films. It seems as though Phantom Thread was inspired by, it's like his Rebecca, his Hitchcock. So I haven't seen Rebecca in ages, so probably in film school. So I can't corroborate that theory, but it sounds about right to me. Let's get into also, yeah, Martin Scorsese. Scorsese influenced everybody after the 90s, right? After Goodfellas. After Goodfellas was kind of this wall-to-wall pop soundtrack, almost like a montage film with interspersed with, with scenes, the actual scenes, right, of drama and violence and thrilling action, what have you. So Boogie Nights is a huge kind of direct line of influence to Goodfellas, or from Goodfellas, I should say, as is, Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, on and on. Interesting story. I probably always think about this, and this is probably why I always connect PTA to QT, is that, they're close friends. I think he called QT after he made Heart 8, which he likes to call Sydney, by the way. It's his term, or it's his preferred nomenclature, his preferred designation for Heart 8. I believe he called QT and said, hey, this is Paul Thomas Anderson. Quentin knew who he was. They became friends, being two just like cinephile nerds. But the one story I always tell in my podcast when I talk about Paul Thomas Anderson and Quentin Tarantino is how they, in the early, maybe late 90s, they're like coked up. I think this is all over film blogs too. They're all coked up in the private movie theater, probably binging a bunch of obscure cinema. And Fiona Apple, who PTA was dating at the time, was turned off of coke because of that night. She said, if you ever want to, a sponsor, or you want to get turned off coke, just get locked in the movie theater with Paul Thomas Anderson and Quentin Tarantino, because apparently it is a bad experience. Can you imagine that? Just these two motor mouths, just egomaniac narcissists, just like just going at each other. Like I bet she could not get a fucking word in, and I can sympathize, nay empathize, because I know what being around those kind of people are. I'm sure they're have other characteristics to PTA and QT. I'm saying, but in that particular point of time, they probably were really up their own asses, to say the least. Let's get into Hard Eight, shall we? Originally titled Sydney, 1996, crime film, got a directed video release. I don't think it even got a theatrical release. He had a really hard time, with his producers, or with the distributor, I'm saying, maybe, and to this day, he really rused that experience. But he didn't really get final cut. I think he had to fight. He said, blah blah blah, this and this. If you don't have to cut it, the distributors didn't cut any of it, and he made like some kind of sacrifice. I don't know what he compromise, and he eventually it came out with his director's cut. So all in all, a win. Didn't get released in theaters. Probably, I think that was maybe the compromise. But he, it's not like James Cameron's Piranha 2 or and what's another horror story? David Fincher's Alien 3, where like he didn't want had to have, even though his name was on it, he didn't want to have like any association whatsoever thereafter with the film after its release, because probably the distributors cut the shit out of it. So good to hear that he's happy with the final cut. Going back to see this, I used to watch it a lot on DVD back in the day. I find it to be underwhelming. Not my favorite PTA film, but still a nice, quiet little character piece. I love all of the influences. They say it's kind of a spiritual sequel to Midnight Run, because Philip Baker Hall was a gambler named Sidney in that film, Midnight Run. I'm talking about, and I also see a lot of Bob Laflamber. It's Jean-Pierre Melville's 1956 proto-French New Wave film. I say proto because it's not really a French New Wave film, but kind of preceded that and kind of influenced, Truffaut, Godard, Chabrol to make like non-studio films, like shoot on location, shooting with small film crews, to capture the lush, exotic nature of Montmartre and Paris and what have you. And but I saw it instantly because I used to love, well, I still do, I guess, but I used to be obsessed with the French New Wave, especially French film in general, but like Melville specifically, Bob Laflamber, Le Samouraï, Le Cercle Rouge, all of his like classic films that are on Criterion. But I remember that plot exactly because it's like an older, distinguished, wise gentleman who took like a kid under his wing, and he even like, I don't know if Bob Laflamber got him that girl, but he pretty much was a huge influence in this kid's life in Bob Laflamber, and it translated almost like verbatim to to the Sydney character and to the John C. Reilly character John, because he kind of like follows him and looks up to him and orders the same drinks as him, and the plot is, if you're unfamiliar, spoilers, but Sydney takes this kid under his wing who was sitting outside a coffee shop with no money, penniless, pretty much trying to gamble his way to pay for his mom's funeral. And again, spoiler alert, but he is revealed to Sydney killed John's father. Yeah, some kind of, it's revealed Sydney was mob ties or something. He's very it's not, it's ambiguous, but it's pretty plain to tell that he's in some kind of organized crime thing, because mob casinos, like he knows the ins and outs of casinos. He knows how to hustle. He's probably a professional gambler. He knows how to work the system and get comps in a couple of maybe like 4 to 5 hours. He did they show this scheme of how to rotate your card, I guess your, what do you call that, the thing that helps you keep track of the card, and rotate that, and keep exchanging it for tokens, rotate the tokens on the card for them to think that you're actually gambling a lot, so they comp you rooms, whereas you're just playing like $20. You're rotating $20 within like 4 hours, but you keep exchanging them, and they think on your card. What's that card called? Jesus, like that card that helps you keep track of all the things you spend. It's driving me nuts. I hate when this happens. The rate card. Sorry, the rate card. So cool, like not wall-to-wall pop soundtracks. No, not even any pop soundtrack. Just score and cool, like even the xylophone soundtrack is very Bob LaFleur. Like Bob LaFleur, gambles to the break of dawn in card rooms and private roulette craps rooms, and there's a xylophone player in the background. He's been playing all night from the club, and he's still playing there. So yeah, very Bob LaFleur, and it goes to show, not only is he, I'm talking about Paul Thomas Anderson here, not only is he huge fans of commercial fare like Big Daddy, that's why he liked Adam Sandler, Midnight Run. He also loves Bob LaFleur, at the time probably very esoteric French film from the 1950s. So you could tell his he kind of merges, he kind of meshes genres, which is a cool sign. Also, his first couple of films here, Sydney was an expansion of his short films Cigarettes and Coffee, as is Boogie Nights, a adaptation of his short film. It's like a short mockumentary film about Dirk Diggler with with not that many actors in it. It's a mockumentary short film called The Dirk Diggler Story, itself based on the 1981 documentary Exhausted, the John C. Holmes The Real Story. So Dirk Diggler is based on John Holmes. Okay, so we're getting into Boogie Nights, made a year right at the gate, or a year after Sydney, Hard Eight, 1997 American comedy drama film set in Los Angeles, San Fernando Valley. I don't have enough time to say how much I love this film. Probably my number one film from Paul Thomas Anderson. His epic sprawling right at the gate, like lay down the gauntlet. Like I'm almost sad that this wasn't his first film, but in some ways it kind of is, because first time he had like a real budget. First time he, I don't want to say like had real actors, but had everything he wanted, and he knew right at the gate, like he didn't want to to argue with financiers and distributors. So he probably still had to fight tooth and nail for some stuff, but not as much. He learned a lot from Hard Eight. So, but what else is there to say about this film? It's so quotable. I mean, you giving me shit, Kurt? My wife has a ass in her cock in the driveway right now, and so many so many great lines. Too many things, too many things. That's not a good line that I like, but I just came out. Epic. This is such a good time. I forgot that Paul Thomas Anderson can make these kind of films, because I was kind of stuck in his filmography between There Will Be Blood and Phantom Thread, which are kind of downers, that I forgot that he can have fun. And this is obviously during his coked out phase, where you could tell this movie's coked up, dialed to 11, just a relentless pace. Extremely funny. I forgot how funny it was. I mean, John C. Reilly. I'm quoting from the Rewatchables here, which is a great. If you really want an in-depth podcast about Boogie Nights, listen to the Rewatchables. Bill Simmons, a bunch of other guys. They love it. Bill Simmons, that's his era. I think he grew up with, 70s porn era. So, but what was I saying? Like John C. Reilly, everything he says is gold. Everything he says is freaking funny. This is preceding Step Brothers. I believe he did Step Brothers in 2000. So they probably saw him in this movie and say, "Hey, let's make Step Brothers, bro." Great fucking cast: Mark Wahlberg, Julianne Moore, Burt Reynolds, Don Cheadle, John C. Reilly, William H. Macy, Heather Graham, Philip Seymour Hoffman in such a bit role, like a nothing role, but he just brings it to life somehow. Philip Seymour Hoffman's in this in a little bit role. Philip Baker Hall, Luis Guzman, Thomas Jane before he's Thomas Jane, bunch of other people here. And, I wasn't of the era of 70s porn. I grew up in, obviously 1982 was when I was born. And so you could tell, like, he loves 70s porn. It's like they were trying to make art, in some instances, just like almost like softcore porn, I guess. And you could tell watching this movie, he has this kind of nostalgia for, film, porn on film, and it's also kind of an allegory for, film is the pure form, right? Like, there's a scene with the Burt Reynolds character, Jack Horner, with one of his, I guess, his financier, Floyd Gandoli. I know the Colonel is the guy who funds it, but Floyd Gandoli, I believe he, in that scene, is like the New Year's Eve party, where he wanted to move forward, move to the future, move to VHS, and he even brought like these 4 like weird looking kids, and he's like, "This is the future right here, like amateur porn." Like, I don't know about you, but I'm a simple man. I just like to have my something lollipop licked and something. I can't forget the line, but it's hilarious. But yeah, it's encapsulated in that scene, right? Of the future. The future of film is VHS. It's almost like you can say that to today. Like, cinema is moving to streaming, right? And sometimes you gotta move forward. You gotta evolve with the times. But Jack Horner was just adamant. He's like, "No, I will never make a film on VHS. I will make films. I will make pornos in film where they belong," which is, if you think about it, so inconvenient. If you think about watching porno movies in theaters and you have to jerk off in public, like, isn't that kind of a crime? Another theme of this film is, surrogate family. Another one of them, his main themes, and maybe his early works, from Hard Eight to Boogie Nights and on to the next film, Magnolia. But I can't say enough about Boogie Nights. It is outstanding. So much fun to watch again. Blast from the past. Um, you can make an argument that Paul Thomas Anderson, pulls out his dick in the beginning of this film and the end of the film, because he just shows you what he's all about. That opening oneer, I guess you could call it. Yeah, it's like it's a one take Steadicam shot, very of the Goodfellas Copa scene, but this one's even more extravagant. I don't know how the hell he came from a crane. The guy, if you think about the logistics of that shot, he started from a crane, the Boogie Nights marquee. It like spins around, follows the Jack Horner car. He gets out with amber waves. Jackie Jack, Jackie Jack, Jack, Jack. Luis Guzman. At that point, I guess that's like a marker for the cameraman to take the camera off and put it on a Steadicam, or maybe it was already rigged to a Steadicam. Follows him through. He had to hit all these marks. I think the behind the scenes list that shot, I think he got it in 7 takes. But I wish there was a behind the scenes documentary about that. He probably didn't know that movie was going to be so influential, but it's so extremely fascinating. How the hell did he get that shot? Man, watch it and maybe you guys can tell me. But the soundtrack is incredible. I can listen to any song on the soundtrack and tell you like what scene that is, from Boogie Shoes to, Best of My Love, the opening scene, the Sister Christian, that scene where with Alfred Molina, the shorts and the shotgun, it's like another movie. It's just You Sexy Thing when we see Scotty J. Oh my God, I just, all right, that's enough. I've talked about Boogie Nights long enough. It's my favorite PTA film. Followed closely by another movie, but we'll get there when we get there. Let's talk about Magnolia. Magnolia, 1999, another sprawling epic. This is his shortcuts. This is his Robert Altman-esque, like 9 different stories, I want to say, but it's a lot. It's a lot of characters, maybe too much, but not for him. He wanted this to be really heavy. It is heavy. It's no Boogie Nights, but I would say it's the peak of this kind of Robert Altman style for him. And he went for a more subdued, quiet film after this, Punch Drunk Love, a romantic comedy. So this is the pinnacle, the zenith of this particular style. Tom Cruise should have won Best Actor here. This is probably his most dramatic role. Don't see him ever. He's working with Inarritu right now, so who knows? He might want to challenge himself and get out of that whole Last Action Hero bit. I'm talking about Tom Cruise here, but I don't know where to start with Magnolia. Really, it's just a movie about fate. About shit happens. The opening 20-minute kind of prologue kind of puts you in that mood of things just happen, right? It's chance. It's all up to chance. And then I guess that's a whole kind of explainer for, the frogs falling from the sky. Terrific cast. Here's the thing. I love that he made all of the music Amy Mann, and he kind of styled, kind of carved and edited the piece around those songs, and it gives it a really cool flow, right? It just like keeps going along with these songs, and it never stops. The pacing is just fantastic. I feel like it is overly ambitious and it is overly long, obviously at the 3.5 hours, I want to say 3:15, something like that. Actually 3:08. And sprawling epic, just grand ambition, just bit off a bit more than he could chew. Some of the characters don't work for me. I feel like the Julianne Moore character is a repeat. It's too similar to her character in Amber Waves and Boogie Nights. You know, he's saying something about celebrity culture, about toxic masculinity in the Frank T.J. Mackey character and the Earl Partridge character, right? And show business, Jimmy Gator and Quiz Kid Donnie Smith, as well as the new kid, I forget his name, Stanley. So a lot of things to say. He's just a little muddled because there's so many characters, and it doesn't hit as hard because there's so many characters. But I respect. You gotta admire the bold, his audacity. He's just going for broke here. It's almost like the studio, New Line Cinema, gave him carte blanche because of Boogie Nights, right? They're like, let him do what he wants. Boogie Nights wasn't a huge success box office wise, but probably the critical praise and everything. He was just like on cloud nine from Boogie Nights, and it wasn't a flop. I guess it kind of was if you take in marketing expenses here. $37 million budget, box office of a little lower than 50 mil. Yeah, I probably lost money, but I don't know if it made up for it in VHS or video releases. Watching it back, I haven't seen this in a long time. Brought me back to my film school days where I watched some scenes over and over. I love the opening where we meet all of our characters to Amy Mann's song One. One is the loneliest number. Love that song. It's just so melodramatic, even to the part where everyone's like lip singing to Save Me. Not Save Me, is it Save Me? I don't know if that was the song that it ended on, but I know it ends on a song as well. And hits kind of hard. Hits really hard. I really love this film as a youngster, as a young aspiring filmmaker, film student, and it brought me back. So a lot of nostalgia. Probably not my in the top 5, top 10, most likely. Yeah, most definitely top 10. I mean, he only has 10 films, so of course it's going to be top 10. In the higher part of the lower 5. How about that? Yeah? Alright, let's move on to Punch Drunk Love. Not too much to say about this. I saw it in theaters because, I was anticipating the next PTA film. But it kind of underwhelmed me. I was like, what happened? After Magnolia, I thought it was going to be like, I knew from the trailers it wasn't going to be like that, but I was like, may have surprised me a bit. It could have surprised me, but it didn't. Very, understated. I like seeing this other side to Adam Sandler, this kind of art house style. He's trying to be more serious, right? And I love how like kind of whimsical it is, how quirky, and kind of built around this that Popeye theme, or the he loves me or he needs me. Yeah, he needs me, he needs me, he needs me, he needs me. I'm not gonna have the terrible voice, terrible pitch, but you guys like that song? I love that song. It's so adorable, isn't it? And you know what? There's something about the character of the Adam Sandler character, I forget his name, Barry Egan, describes here the cast an unmarried entrepreneur with social anxiety, to say the least. Yeah, the part that hits close to home to me is the social anxiety for sure. I have that in spades, but the overbearing sisters, led by Mary Lynn Rashkub. Can't pronounce her name. I know she's Chloe from 24. But the way they berate him hits close to home to me so much because I have, you know, my single mom who raised me, so I can't, be mad at her for that. But um, her and her sisters really kind of bullied me, um, emotional bullying, and it hit really close to home. And there's a lot of that in his films. There's some of that in there's particular moments of that in Boogie Nights and Magnolia as well. Couldn't pinpoint them right now because I can't. My memory's terrible, but I love that about his work. It just very real moments that make you feel uncomfortable, right? Within this kind of sprawling, epic, entertaining piece of work. Very honest, right? Portrayals of characters. So his characterization definitely, I was going to say leaves much to be desired, but no, that's the opposite of that. He characterizes very well, and they all don't sound the same, right? You look at Tarantino's work or, Aaron Sorkin, they all sound the same. They all kind of like quirky, like fast talking. In so far as Aaron Sorkin's work, they all sound super intelligent, right? So this is the opposite. You look at like the characters in Hard Eight; they're kind of scumbags, right? Besides Sydney, Sydney's almost like the only refined one, and the only one like with any hint of education. That's why it's so frustrating that he, when he's trying to rein in John and the Gwyneth Paltrow character, like he's like, no, I'm trying to tell you what to do. Like, do this, do it, but they won't listen because they're just like children. You ever try to tell a child what to do? It's nigh impossible. They almost have to go through it the hard way for them to learn, right? It's like, but no, I actually have been through this. I'm telling you what to do, but that's a whole parenting challenge there too, right? It's like, what do you do? Like, you can't tell them because they're not gonna want to do it. You have to somehow kind of like incept this idea into their mind and make them think it's their own. I'm going off on a tangent here, but yeah, that was Punch Drunk Love. I highly enjoyed watching it again, and his last work with composer John Bryan, the last movie that has a kind of whimsical score, so there's something to be said about that. It lists here, it says American absurdist romantic comedy. I don't know how it's absurdist, but sure, I'll take it. Like I said earlier, Punch Drunk Love is almost like a palate cleanser. He didn't make another movie until 5 years later with There Will Be Blood, which is my second favorite Paul Thomas Anderson film. For the longest time, it was my number one. It is undoubtedly a masterpiece. 2007 epic period drama film based on Oil by Upton Sinclair, the 1927 novel. And this is very... I love this description here. Daniel Plainview embarks on a ruthless quest for wealth during the Californian oil boom in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Almost like the first traces of industry, right? Like, and of, kind of cutthroat businessman, entrepreneur type. We have a bunch of those today, right? I'm trying to be one, almost. No joke there too. So, but the first film scored by Johnny Greenwood. I haven't mentioned this, but his collaboration with Robert Elswit, a long time, I believe, Robert Altman collaborator as well. Just dynamic camera work from Boogie Nights to Magnolia, and then here kind of tones it down, right? He has to. He's like almost... I always remember this, but in my poetry writing class, yes, you heard me right, I took a poetry writing class. I remember this very cool, like Iranian Persian guy, who always wore this like cool leather jacket. He mentioned, we're talking about I don't know why we're talking about cinema in our poetry writing class, but I guess, poetry, we need all the merge all kind of influences. But he was saying how much he loved. We're talking about what movies we've been watching, I guess, and he was like, "Oh, There Will Be Blood is fantastic. Like Paul Thomas Anderson has graduated from his long takes and whip pans." And when I heard that, I was like, "Wow, he's right on." He says, he graduated from the whip pans and the long takes and the kind of show offy camera moves and opts for just true kind of characterization, which he did before, but maybe it was muddled with the fact that he kind of was too showy with the camera. A lot of people probably didn't pay attention to the characters because of that. But now, like, the characters like were full front, like undeniable, right there in your face. Like, I keep saying like, I hate when people do that, but you ever watch Love Is Blind? Like when characters always say like, I hate that. But I'm struggling for words to come up with words right now. But Jesus Christ, man, this movie is his Treasure of the Sierra Madre. Yeah, people were saying, well, it's widely known that PTA loves Treasure of the Sierra Madre, and that movie is more than anything, like the American spirit, commerce. Um, Daniel Plainview could be described as, the devil himself, but I see him as just a very ambitious entrepreneur, He's taken what he's rightfully what he rightfully desires. All within his rights, right? I sound super MAGA-y, but it's true, Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Maybe he doesn't want happiness; he wants the pursuit of wealth. This movie is pretty funny, not all the sun stuff because bastard in a basket. That stuff is pretty harsh. Gotta admit. The scene there at the end where he talks to his old young HW, sorry, old HW, and he tells him, I just needed you as a pretty face, as a friendly face to do business, to buy land, is what he needed to construct all those oil rigs. I just saw the film. What the fuck are those called? Those things, the oil things. That's the official word for it, I believe. But it's hella funny. The Paul Dano character. I drink your milkshake. My straw's over here, and it reaches all the way over to yours. So I drink your milkshake. That's drainage, is what he's describing there. All the stuff where he tells him it's just like a tete-a-tete, right? Him and I think he's the Eli Sunday. Yeah, Eli Sunday is the kind of this pastor or this preacher who thinks he's smarter than Daniel Plainview, but he's not. He always comes short. He just comes shy of everything. He wants to. I feel like he wants to be business savvy, but he isn't. He thinks he is. He says, I want this and this much money for this plot of land, but he may be intelligent enough, but he did not have the financial means to test him, to spar with him, with Daniel Plainview I'm talking about. And then in the end, he he smashes his head in. Daniel Plainview smashes Eli Sunday's head in with a bowling pin. Says, "I'm finished." And it is such a dark, macabre, cold ending in film. It felt so unlike, his other films. And maybe that was why it just stood out to me so much. It was just like so profoundly just astonished by it. I was like, this is such a departure. It was like his Kubrickian, it was like a Kubrick film, Like you talk about how cold British people are, and that's what comes to mind. Kubrick films, right? Um, Even the way like he treats his actors. Don't get me started on what he did to what's her name from The Shining, but terrible. I know. I hope PTA didn't do that to his actors. I know Daniel Day Lewis is probably one of the greatest actors of his generation. Method actor, always gets into his character. That scene where he's like rolling around in the mud with Paul Dano, I wonder how much mud he had to eat, Paul Dano, because that looked rough. I know Daniel Day Lewis doesn't mess around, so as an actor, so that must have been rough. I don't know too much about the background of this. I need to read up about it more, but I gotta say, one of my favorite Paul Thomas Anderson films, my number 2, There Will Be Blood. Let's get into The Master. When I saw this film, I loved it. I was probably into that. I was more into dark stuff, so The Master and There Will Be Blood was like, I drank from that Kool-Aid completely. Just give me more. Like, take my money, Paul Thomas Anderson, because that's what I was all about. Like 70 millimeter. I saw it on the 7 millimeter presentation in the ArcLight. So, but again, a period drama about post World War II. Joaquin Phoenix, fantastic performances. Freddie Quell, Philip Seymour Hoffman as Lancaster Dodd, playing the L. Ron Hubbard, making it up as he goes along, is what Jesse Plemons, his son, Val, says. Great fucking cast here. Amy Adams, Laura Dern. Rami Malek, unrecognizable almost. Jesse Plemons. So I feel like this is a bit less cold than There Will Be Blood, but in that same vein, in that same kind of stripped away of almost any kind of recognizable style. It's just like almost his style is to be, I guess, more stripped, right? Like I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna let my camera do the talking, like vista shots, close-ups of actors, but no, no bombastic whip pans, quick cutting. He's kind of, I guess, he's older now and he's mellowed out. So I feel like the Master is a bit more optimistic, but at the same time, still in that it's highly existential, highly philosophical, and very heady, very kind of weighty, and a bit. I feel like it's not too long, but some parts I feel like it draws on too long. So it's not a long film. It's an hour, 17 minutes, but there's something about it. I liked it a lot when I first saw it. Don't like it a lot now. So that probably has more to say about me than anything. But I just don't find the cause and Scientology fascinating for some reason. Maybe if I were into that more, it would compel me more, will fascinate me more. But for now, on the lower tier of PTA films for me now. So Another departure here is that Robert Elswit was not the cinematographer. Mihai Malamer Jr. and also continues his collaboration with Johnny Greenwood here. Very stringy orchestral score. And very hopeful ending though. So it's not super downer like There Will Be Blood. But that was like a great dramatic, like, I'm finished. And then the dun, 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 dun. All right, that's all I have to say about the Master. Let's move on to shortly Inherent Vice. If you want my full thoughts on Inherent Vice, I swoon all over that film in episode 1 when I talk about, my Desert Island top 5s and talk about Inherent Vice and one battle after another. So, because they're both PTA and Thomas Pynchon adaptations. But shortly, briefly, real quick, another collaboration with distributed by Warner Brothers here. So, Inherent Vice returns with his cinematographer Robert Elswit and great fantastic cast, almost like The Big Lebowski meets The Long Goodbye, insofar as this like stoner neo noir black comedy. So, I love Inherent Vice. Inherent Vice is probably top 5 for me right now, just because it comes back to that, more lighthearted, quirky nature of his early films, infused with his visual sensibility at the time, and his fondness for period pieces. I go on and on about how he got certain looks, with vintage cameras and lighting and also the marriage of that and costume and production design. Fantastic. It's almost like akin to time traveling, right? But I loved Inherent Vice. I saw it in the theater. I was highly obsessed with those string of films. There Will Be Blood, The Master, Inherent Vice. So let's move on to Phantom Thread, which I did not like when I saw it. I saw it in the theater, I believe also at the ArcLight in 70mm, because I was on that kick, as I said, about like format, and especially PTA and format. PTA and format, I should say. But his closest thing to maybe kind of prestige cinema, because it takes place in London and is very Edith Wharton-esque, but very fascinating tale. I didn't really get what he was going at before. I guess when I first saw it, I was just like kind of jarring the way it wasn't an LA film, and it was like this cold, detached look at fashion designer haute couture dressmaker, 1950s London. I guess it's characterized here as a psychological period drama. Spoiler warning: Vicky Creeps, is that how you say her name? The Alma Elson character, tries to hold on to her man using Munchausen by proxy, which I thought only worked with kids. So I guess you have to be really crafty or really smart for that to work on adults. And somebody as smart as Reynolds Woodcock. I see what you did there, PTA. And somebody like him, as somebody as fastidious as him, he's almost like a Sheldon Cooper-esque, like, oh, it's so funny because he's so particular, right? I guess that was the height of Big Bang Theory too, so I guess you can make that parallel more astutely, more promptly. But not much to say about Phantom Thread. I didn't like it as much. I was starting to veer away from Paul Thomas Anderson. At this point in my life, I was like, there are more exciting filmmakers out there. So, which is a shame because he starts to kick it up here, henceforth, in his latter part of the career. So let's get to that. Another notable observation here is that Paul Thomas Anderson, had I guess creative differences with Robert Elswit, and he shot the film himself with no cinematographer listed, and only Michael Bauman as the lighting cameraman. And it says here they pushed their 35mm film stock and filled its frames with theatrical haze to dirty up their look. Apparently, Paul Thomas Anderson, PTA, didn't want it to look like The Crown, which was, a huge thing back then, I guess, at the time. And, The Crown looks beautiful, looks super clean, gorgeous light. And he was clear it could not look like that. Elswit kind of shots fired here when he publicly expressed skepticism of Anderson's cinematography, saying in an interview he just threw a lot of smoke in the room, which he would never let me do. He never let me smoke a set. I enjoyed the film. If I shot that movie, I would not be happy with it ending up looking like it looked. That's all, end quote. So, yeah, apparently this is, it sucks because Robert Elswit was such a integral cog in most of PTA's filmography. So it's a shame they kind of parted ways there. Getting to the end of his filmography here, Licorice Pizza, I only saw once when it came out, I believe in 2021, which, that was like post-COVID, so it probably dropped on streaming pretty quickly. Did not see that in theaters. And didn't think highly of it. I was just like, I was already down on fandom threads, so I was like watching it with almost like crossed arms and saying, kind of show me what you got, and it didn't show me what you got. It was kind of like a low key coming of age story, but of like almost of like a first time filmmaker. It was like, I was like, you're a seasoned filmmaker. What are you making this for? So I did not see the point in of him making this, but in hindsight now, I could see that it was made. No, and it seems like I'm throwing massive shade at it, but it's a fine film. It's a completely cromulent film, whimsical. Back to the Punch Drunk Love days. I love Alana Haim. I love Cooper Hoffman, son of Philip Seymour Hoffman. I forgot Sean Penn was in it. Tom Waits. Bradley Cooper's in this, for Christ's sake. Benny Safdie. So it's a lot of fun if it wasn't a PTA film. You know what I mean? It's almost like an up and coming film director, his or her first film that's like, oh, this is how I grew up in the 70s, So I guess it could have been about him, who knows, but I didn't read too much about it because I wasn't super interested in it. But like I said earlier in the beginning of this podcast, I can see now that is very much like Punch Drunk Love insofar as it is a palate cleanser for one battle after another, which is undoubtedly his next masterpiece. If you look at Punch Drunk Love, what did he make after Punch Drunk Love? His first palate cleanser. There Will Be Blood, So you can tell every time he makes like a quirky, like smaller film, a masterpiece is gonna come right after. If you're into patterns, if you look at the chart, if you look at the stock market, it's gonna go down, then go up. So one battle after another is definitely to the moon, as they say on Wall Street Bets. So let's get into one battle after another. I talked about it a lot already in episode 1, so if you want my full thoughts, go back and listen to that. Watching it again, one battle after another, did not hit as hard for me. My first and second viewings in theaters, obviously, because my first time I saw it, I did not get it. Honestly, I was just like, maybe I was just like, all the expectation, everyone calling it a masterpiece, and the hype of a new film, the hype of a new PTA film too. I had so much expectation for it. I enjoyed it immensely. I just didn't get what the tone was, because, and it may sound really stupid for this, until my second viewing, until I saw it with an audience, and with a packed audience, on 70mm IMAX, where the sound really hit hard in that theater, and the audience really was alive for that, and I got all the jokes. Apparently, I don't know when to laugh until there's a laugh track these days, and which is pretty much what it came down to. I didn't get the absurdity of it all. Like, I felt like when I was my first viewing, I was just trying to get the plot, and also because of all the things going on, I was just like, was that a joke? I was just like, I didn't get it. So that's what I didn't get. I get that it was a finely crafted film the first time. The action sequences were fantastic. Characterization was fantastic, as per usual. The third time I've seen it now on digital at home, watching it almost like high as Bob Ferguson here. I see why it is so lauded, so praised. I'm not going to get into the details. Go back and listen if you want my full thoughts on it, but I see it now as Star Wars. It is basically Star Wars: A New Hope or Star Wars 1977. If you're not into the whole brevity thing, and I'm using that word wrong, but think about it, okay? It is the hero's journey. Our young hero, Willa Ferguson, Charlene Calhoun, Bob and Perfidia's daughter, is Luke Skywalker. I know all of these don't necessarily line up, but just humor me for a minute and think about it. Leonardo DiCaprio, Ghetto Pat, Bob Ferguson is Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? He's the mentor, and saves Willa and all that stuff. He doesn't die like in A New Hope, so that's where the parallels end. Colonel Stephen J. Lockjaw, Sean Penn is Darth Vader. I am your father, so that lines up, right? All of his, I guess, the Christmas Adventurers Club is the Empire. They're the Empire, right? I guess all these henchmen are stormtroopers. Beneath, this is my favorite. I think I may have mentioned this in the first podcast. I'm fucking loopy as shit. But okay. Benicio del Toro, Sergio San Carlos, Sensei, Willow's Karate teacher, leader of the undocumented community in Backtown Cross, is motherfucking Yoda. Is that great or what? Think about that. He is fucking Yoda. He's this wise, cool, calm, and collected guy, who loves to drink beer, just a few small beers. We've been laid siege for 100 years, so he knows what he's doing. He's the Latino Harriet Tubman, right? Yeah, think about that. It's Star Wars and it's modern, so it's you can do all that other stuff. Christmas Adventures Club is some kind of right wing elite, MAGA Proud Boys, whatever Leo and our characters are, righteous, what have you. That's all well and good, but if you think about it as modern Star Wars, it is a fucking classic masterpiece, right? Isn't that great? Anyway, I don't want to get into it anymore. I've talked over an hour, just over an hour. So sorry, my thoughts were a little all over the place here, just trying to rush to get through this filmography. But final thoughts on PTA. Him and Quentin Tarantino, maybe David Fincher, very different filmmakers, I know. My favorite filmmakers right now. So, but right now, everyone makes the PTA QT comparison. Right now, PTA's got a leg up, man, because if you look at QT and his like, oh, he's very adamant that he wants to make his 10th film and that's it, right? But it's limiting him because, he's supposed to make The Critic, and he canceled that for whatever reason. Maybe he's just like, oh, it's not good enough. Not good enough for my final film. Look at what PTA's doing right now. Ever since Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he's done 2 films. PTA has done 2 films after QT's last film. So, and he's on cloud 9 right now with all the praise that one battle after another is getting, and he's surpassing QT right now in my book. He maybe surpassed him after There Will Be Blood because, he went outside of himself and said, I don't want to just do genre films. I don't want to do Altman kind of films anymore. I want to break off and do this other thing. I want to try it and see what happens. And he did it, and he's thriving. Right now he's, off of that kick and doing this other kick, but I don't know what era this is. I guess it's the action thriller. Like, he wants to make more commercially successful, viable films. Accessible. I mean, this movie, I want to say lost money still because it only made 200 mil at the box office from a $175 million budget, and that's not including marketing expenses. But at the end of the day, I think One Battle After Another will live on as a cinematic masterpiece, and nobody can take anything away from that, so running out of steam here, so I'm going to end it there. What do you guys think? What do you guys think about that comparison of QT and PTA? Like, is it rational? Is it justifiable? I don't know. Like, people do that. I do that. I always kind of measure their filmography against each other. Maybe it's not fair for either filmmaker, but do you think PTA has surpassed QT? There's always going to be that debate, right? It's Kobe or Michael Jordan. Who's better? LeBron. But that's what makes things interesting, right? All right, guys. I keep saying I'm going to end it here, but I'm going to really end it here. Next time, if you guys are interested, going back to my early film school days, watching Breathless, A Bout Souffle, is that how you say the French title? The film that changed the world, changed filmmaking, as my world cinema professor says, and a lot of film professors say, a lot of filmmakers say. Quentin Tarantino loves Godard. Well, he loves early Godard. But I'm watching A Bout Souffle, the 1960 French New Wave film, to prepare for a double feature I'm watching, so not many movies to watch this time for you guys. Not that much homework. But I'm watching Godard Mon Amour, the loose biopic, made by the guy who made The Artist. And then I'm going to watch Nouvelle Vague, the Richard Linklater biopic about the making of A Bout Souffle. So, kind of Godard, going back to Godard here, and seeing how, all the machinations of the making of other cinematic masterpiece, Abu Tsuf. So if you guys want to, know what I'm talking about next time, that's what I'm doing. Thank you guys for listening to the Pretentious Cinephile. Check us out on pretentiouscinephile1982.blogspot.com and our pinterest.com/pretentiouscinephile1982. It's going to do it from me, guys. We'll see you later. Bye.
Green Acres, Beverly Hillbillies, and Hooterville Junction will no longer be so damn relevant, and women will not care if Dick finally got down with Jane on Search for Tomorrow, because black people will be in the street looking for a brighter day. The revolution will not be televised.